Giltz. While Gerald is getting hooked up, we are hoping to do a live demonstration. We've heard a lot of good status today about the status of the guides and the different initiatives going on within this subject area. What we'd like to do this afternoon is demonstrate a product that was a direct result of worker feedback. Briefly, we had a first-line supervisor who, as we are all aware, have got many responsibilities, and came in and said, right now I'm being expected to keep track of my workers' training and medical status. I have matrixed workers who come in and leave and go depending on what job I'm supervising. Isn't there a way to where I can have a real-time capability to determine, and from on high. And so the question that was brought forward to the training managers is, why can't you guys give me a tool that will provide that information on a real-time basis, and why can't my schedulers have it so they'll know the people they plan on working a job in 2 weeks are really going to be qualified and not have work restrictions in order to work that job. So we have a tool, the Hanford Site Worker Eligibility Tool, and what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Gerald as soon as he points his hand up in the air. He's still working on it here. Some of the generations that we've gone through is this tool is available to anyone. The difficulty or the challenge for any particular site is having your IT organization be able to go into your medical provider and pull down medical records, as well as going to your training management system to pull down training records. Which for an IT person, I'm assured, is very easy to do. You just need to be able to ask the question correctly and then matrix it in the right direction. But it's an IT, depending on what kind of software and your internet requirements at your particular site. That seems to be the biggest challenge. As we develop this, we're currently supporting 5 different contractors and all of their subcontractors, which is in the neighborhood of about 100 subcontractors or so, and 2 DOE offices with this information. And I think Gerald is about ready to go, and I'm done tap dancing.
All right, very good, Ted.
Okay.
Thank you. We are certainly pleased to be here this afternoon. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of showcase the Hanford Site Worker Eligibility Tool. As Ted mentioned, it's a very unique tool, one of the few that I've ever seen. In fact, it's the only one that I've seen that covers both medical and training requirements. We've had a lot of information today, and I would call it at the institutional level. So I'm about to shift gears, and I'm going to take you right down into the weeds of the first-line supervisor. So what I'd ask you to do is put on your first-line supervisor hats and kind of put yourself in the role of those folks. They have a very challenging role. So the first thing that you're responsible for now is worker qualifications. By definition, qualified means both medically cleared and trained. I'll kind of use the term eligible worker here because that's what we view as a qualified worker in this system. As Ted mentioned, our first-line supervisors have a great challenge at the Hanford site. Not too long ago, people would be assigned to a single facility or a single project. They would work for one supervisor. The supervisor knew the crew, so they had a pretty good idea of what the qualification status was. That's not the case anymore. Sorry. I don't have my clicker. That's not the case anymore. Now we end up working a lot of resource pools to where we have people who not only cross company boundaries, but they also cross facility boundaries and company boundaries. So now the first-line supervisor may not know who's going to be in the work crew. Thank you. Be in the work crew until they actually show up that morning. So when we were looking at the functional requirements of the HSWET system, we went out and asked them, how do you do this now? Well, the diligent ones, they described this fairly onerous process of going out and accessing the training system. They'd pull down the training history for every person, and they'd have to work their way down through a long list of courses and identify which ones were applicable and whether they were current. And then they would go to the medical system and do the same thing. They were telling us that it was taking them up to an hour or more to be able to determine whether or not the crew could actually go to work. The ones that are not quite so diligent made the assumption that workers were good, and in a couple of cases we found out that that really wasn't the best assumption to make. So the goal of the HSWET team was to be able to promote worker safety and health by providing the first-line supervisors an easy-to-use tool to determine if they were qualified and eligible to go do the work. So this is the home page. So the first area I'll go into is the CHET system, which is the work control area. And I'll bring in a work package. So the first screen here is a job activity screen, a little bit of general information about the work package. This particular one is working in the ventilation system of the plutonium finishing plant at the Hanford site. And the thing I'll point out here is I have a start date and an end date. So if I'm the fieldwork supervisor, I can put in an estimated date range that I'll work the package, and I'll tell you why that becomes important as we get into the reporting part of this. So now that I've got my work package selected, I can go into my resource tab, and it identifies the resources that have been brought in through the work package. And so these are our craft workers here. We have some pipe fitters. We have some welders. We have a couple of different types of operators here. Now you'll notice that there is a project filter on this one, and I don't have it on the operator right now, so you can see that it's got 394 people right now. When you first bring something into the system, it compares it to everybody on the Hanford site in that craft area. And so it'll make the report run longer, so I'll add a filter in this case and try to narrow that down, and I'll take it down into the PFP area. Tells me that it's been added. And so now I have 101 people that it'll compare the report to. So this gives me my resources, so I've now got my people, which is part of the criteria that we were looking at. Training and medical deals with the controls. Because this work package had an automated job hazard analysis tied to it, it brought it in automatically, and it applied the training controls that are associated with that particular job hazard analysis. Currently, we don't have the medical side of the hazards tied to the AJHA process, and so I have to add those manually. So I'm going to add beryllium. And hazardous waste. Tells me what's going to be added. So again, it'll tell me which training courses are going to be added and what medical programs I'm going to be comparing those workers to. And then they are listed down below here. Okay. So now I've got my people, I've got my controls in place. This tab here becomes a resource matrix, which tells me what things are assigned to the individual resources. So the pipe fitters have everything. The welders have everything. And I get down into the operators, and they don't have all of those things, but they have the majority of them. So now that I've got my people and my controls in place, and I've got the criteria tied to the right folks, now I can go in and run the report. This report will take probably take 10 to 15 seconds. Going through a remote connection now, it might take maybe 20 seconds, so we'll kind of see how long it goes. When I was testing the system, it went pretty quick, so I felt okay.
While we're waiting the 20 seconds, these reports can be set up to where they're pre-programmed, to where on a daily basis, if the supervisor wants to come in and run it in the morning before they go to the pre-job brief, they can. Or they could have a clerk or somebody, or their schedulers, they can pull this report as a standalone report.
So now that I've got my report, it is by resource, so you can see that the first one is pipe fitters. The first part of the report identifies the criteria associated with it, so it gets in and identifies what medical programs I have, what training is associated with that, and then it tells me how many eligible workers I have. So in this case, I have 7 out of 13 pipe fitters that are eligible to go do this job. I'll scroll it down just a little bit. Now I have my welders. Same thing, gives me the criteria associated with them that I was comparing to. And it tells me that I have 3 out of 4 eligible workers. Now the one thing I'll point out here is over on the right, you'll see there's an X in the column that's marked WR. WR means work restriction. And so this is one of the key elements for our supervisors. We need them to know if somebody has a work restriction. It doesn't tell them what the work restriction is, so we don't have any privacy issues there, but they do have to go get some additional information to determine whether or not that person can actually do this job. So it does identify that. We think it's very, very important that the supervisors make sure they don't assign people to places they shouldn't be doing work. And then down here is the operators, and what I wanted to point out here is this is where the dates become somewhat important. When you start seeing the yellow blocks, it means that those people are either going to expire on some training element or a medical component during the time frame that I expect to go work the package. So I'll either have to make sure they get training if I want to use them or get their medical updated if I want to use them. So it's just kind of a visual highlight. So that's kind of a summary of the CHET system and what the report looks like. It runs pretty quick. It helps them. And I'll take just a couple of seconds here and show you what the organization side of this looks like. The system has all kinds of bells and whistles, and I won't go into too many of those. So this gets into the job function side, and I'm going to be looking at PFP waste operations in this case. And so we'll kind of go through the same process. We'll identify what are the workers. So in this case, I have PFP workers, and I've tied it to a department, and over on the right it lists the number of people that are tied to that department. So the nice part of this is, now that I've got it tied to the human resources system, if the people in that organization change, that'll automatically update in HSweat, and I don't have to manually maintain the personnel on the list. They will change automatically for me. So then when I go into my controls, we have some hazard controls. So in this case, I have beryllium selected. So listen there. If I want to see what is going to be tied to those folks, I can click on the little question mark. It's going to tie me to beryllium worker training and the beryllium medical. And then I can add some other training if I need to. In this case, I added the waste operations qualification and also the entry requirements for PFP. And so this area gives you two types of reports. One is the eligibility report, which is the people who meet all of the criteria specified. Same type of thing, tells me the criteria that I'm comparing to, and then gives me the list of workers. So in this case, I have, looks like 7 workers that are meet the eligibility. 2 of them are flagged yellow. That means they will expire within the next 90 days. And then I have a couple of them over here that it says their medical is clear, but there's deficient on training somewhere. And so then I can go over to my watch standard report, and it'll give me the status of those people. And then I can determine what they may be deficient on. Same type of thing, criteria up front. And so this one gives me people down the left side, and it gives me the courses and the medical across the top. And notice it's color-coded, so I can easily do a comparison there. Blue means that they're current. Yellow means they'll expire in 90 days. Red means that they're expired. Now, the one thing I'll point out here, notice that this is a little lighter shade of red in this particular block here. And that is because the person is current, or they're expired, and that is not on their training plan. That's why it's a little lighter shade. So it's kind of a visual highlight for the supervisor to go, that might be why they're expired, because it's not on their training plan. Maybe I need to go review their training plan and make sure they add that so they become current on that. And then the last thing I can do in this area is I can schedule an email report. I can set it up on either watch standard or eligibility on a time frame that I want. And so what we tried to do with the system in this area is try to make it really maintenance free. I can identify my people, tie them to the human resources database. I can tie the controls to the medical and training database. If those requirements and people change, it'll update automatically. And now it sends me my report once a week. And essentially, I shouldn't have to go back into the system unless I want to change the parameters. So it works out very, very well. So in summary there, we feel like we've been able to put together a really user-friendly tool for the supervisors that improves their efficiency and helps ensure that our workers are eligible to go do work safely. With that, Ted, you got any other comments you want to add?
No, I don't, but I'll ask for questions from the floor or online. Tony?
Can't resist that. This is excellent tool, by the way, Ted, as you know. Tony Umek from Florida. Question would be, in the range of time, how long did it take from the time you began to develop the tool till it was effective in the field? Do you kind of have a frame of reference of how long it took you and maybe how much effort it took to get there?
First version rolled out pretty quick.
Yeah, the first version rolled out fairly quick, but it was really only an ad hoc search tool where you identified the workers, identified the requirements, got the report. It did have the capability of saving a group of workers and a bundle of courses and the medical, but it didn't save medical. And so while it saved those areas, if things changed, the supervisor had to go in and manually update them all the time. They were not connected to the live databases, so they updated automatically. And it didn't store the medical, so you had to go identify the medical every time you went in. We went from that phase to the next phase, which was what you've seen here, which was storing the organizations, tying them to the other live databases so the supervisor doesn't have to do manual updates. And then the last phase that we just did a couple of months ago was adding the work control area so you can pull a work package in and see who can go do the job on that package.
How long a time frame?
I think to get to the 9 months to get to the retained live capability.
It was, for the work control process, I think we spent 4 months to get that one in place. The organization one, we spent about 9 months, and the previous one, I think we spent about 9 months. So it was kind of a few months at a time.
Third-party medical contractor.
We do. We have very good cooperation.
And that was a large part of the
Yes.
discussions. Legal and the medical provider had obviously some concerns, and contract issues had to be thought about because we've got so many contractors involved. So we tried to find the most complicated site to do it at, and we were successful there. So
Good questions.
Don't do that. These people did not get a proper introduction, and they certainly provided some very useful insights and helping us in a lot of diverse ways to solve some of our issues about work planning and control. So Gerald Eaton, he serves in the Hanford Federal Training Center at Hanford, which includes program management of the Hanford site worker eligibility tool. He has 20 years of performance-based training, management, and administration experience. He had served in training management in the commercial power industry, the Hanford site, and the Oak Ridge site. Let's go to Ted. Ted is the Hanford Federal Training Center Radiation Safety Manager and the National Training Center Project Manager, providing safety and health adult learning expertise in collaboration with NTC and labor personnel. He has 40 years of Navy nuclear and organizational improvement experience. And I certainly didn't want you guys to leave the podium without sharing the wealth of experience. And this seems to be a very interesting tool. And in terms of work planning and control, one of the key controls for the work is whether the people are trained appropriately, they have all the training, and certainly want them to be fit for duty for the jobs. So certainly we apologize for that, but it's a great presentation. I think we have a couple of more questions here.
Let me add one thing before I get a question. I do have a flyer available that I'll leave out on the table, so if you want to pick one up on your way out, it identifies a number of the attributes that the system has. It's got a graphic that depicts the architecture of the system. We identify the system requirements that we're using, and we have some contact information. If you want to contact us to get more information or some assistance on doing something, just pick it up, give us a call. I'll leave it out on the table so you can pick it up when you leave.
Yeah, I'm Rick Reynolds from URS. The question is this. You mentioned if you went and got a package and you could load that package in, you could screen out workers that are available or eligible for the package. Will it interface with work platforms like Maximo and Asset Suite to be able to lock and load on the front end and then identify all your workers?
Yes, in this case, I pull in from a work control system called the job control system that is kind of a homegrown system. We also have an area that we'll pull in a Maximo package, And we didn't include our WRPS tank farms people because they were considering changing their work control system, but once they finalize on what they do there, we believe we can include those two fairly easily, just map their feed to our fields.
So a week or two prior in, you could lock and load people for resource planning, right?
Yes, in
Perfect.
fact, that's what this package did. It identified who would be available in the month of June.
Thank you.
I don't want to oversimplify this because I'm not an IT person, but really this is just SQL queries using your data systems and then putting it on the face of this system, connecting the dots. So if you've got an SQL programmer and working with Gerald, it's pretty straightforward, I believe. I mean, you got firewall. We all got firewall issues. We all got internet issues, but we were able to demonstrate this remote going into the Hanford servers and getting real-time information.
It runs an SQL database, and we're using a Cold Fusion front end for it.
Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to make a comment. This is David Weitzman, and most recently, when you hear about computer-based tools for work planning control, they're kind of used in a somewhat negative connotation that they're overused and people aren't really thinking about the actual hazards and the work. They're just checking boxes. But personally, I think these tools are wonderful because, as Gerald said, it allows the planner and SME to take care of the fundamental routine concerns about work planning, and then they have time to use their brain and think about the actual job and really look into what is really going on there. So I think these are wonderful tools, and I hope you get to propagate this across the complex.
We think it's a pretty unique tool, and we're glad to be here to share it with you.
David, did you allow a final check to see if anyone from the field had questions?
Yeah, let's do that. Are there any other questions? And Joe, will you unmute people on the web conference? Unmuted. Anybody in the web conference that wants to speak up, and even if you're just on the telephone, we've unmuted all those systems, so this is your chance to speak up. If you've been holding your tongue all day, now you can speak up. Anybody there? Okay.
Okay, thank you, David. How long is the break?
We're exactly on time, believe it or not. The break's until 3:40. It's 15 minutes.
I would urge you to come back after the break. We want to just kind of wrap up for the day and reflect on, kind of where we are. And we would welcome input from the people here in the room as well as the ones that are remote. So see you soon, I hope.